I was out in my garage on a frozen Saturday morning in February when I heard the unmistakable sound of someone clearing their throat behind me. I turned around to see Patricia standing at the edge of my driveway, her arms crossed over her puffy winter coat, her face pinched into that expression I had come to know all too well in the 6 months since I had moved to this neighborhood in Eagle River, Alaska. "Good morning, Patricia," I said, setting down my wrench and wiping my hands on an old rag. The temperature was hovering around 15 degrees, and my breath came out in thick white clouds. "Yancey Thompson," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the morning air. "We need to talk about that machine." I followed her gaze to my brand-new Polaris snow machine sitting in my garage. I had bought it just 3 days earlier, a beautiful piece of equipment that I had been dreaming about for years. The price tag had been steep, but after landing a promotion at the engineering firm where I worked, I had finally pulled the trigger. "What about it?" I asked, though I already suspected where this conversation was heading. Patricia took a step closer, her designer boots crunching on the packed snow. She was in her mid-40s, with blonde hair that she kept in a perfect bob and a collection of North Face jackets that probably cost more than my snow machine. She had introduced herself as the president of the Timber Ridge Homeowners Association within hours of my moving truck pulling up to my new house. "You know very well what about it," she said. "That snow machine is a violation of our community standards." Section 7. Paragraph 3 of the HOA bylaws clearly states that no recreational vehicles may be stored in a manner visible from the street. I looked back at my garage. The door was open because I had been doing some maintenance work, checking the oil and making sure everything was ready for a trip I had planned for the following weekend. My garage door is open. I am working on it. Once I am done, the door will be closed and it would not be visible from the street. "That is not the point," Patricia said, her voice rising slightly. "The point is that these machines are not in keeping with the aesthetic we have worked so hard to maintain in Timber Ridge. They are noisy, they are dirty, and frankly, they attract the wrong element." I felt my jaw tighten. I had dealt with Patricia multiple times since moving in. First, it had been about the color of my mailbox, which she claimed was half a shade off from the approved palette. Then it had been about my trash cans being visible for 20 minutes longer than permitted on collection day. Each time, I had complied with her demands, wanting to keep the peace. But this was different. This was my property, my garage, and my recreational equipment that I had every legal right to own. "Patricia, with all due respect, what I keep in my garage is my business. When the door is closed, you cannot see it from the street. I am not violating any bylaws." Her eyes narrowed. "I am warning you, Yancey. If you do not remove that machine from the premises within 72 hours, the HOA will be forced to take action." "What kind of action?" I asked, feeling my patience wearing thin. "We will fine you. We will place a lien on your property if necessary. We have authority to maintain the standards of this community, and we will use it." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. "You know what, Patricia? I have read the HOA bylaws front to back. Nowhere does it say I cannot own a snow machine. Nowhere does it say I cannot store it in my garage. You are overstepping." "We will see about that," she said, turning on her heel and marching back down my driveway. I watched her go, feeling a mix of frustration and disbelief. I had moved to Alaska specifically because I wanted to enjoy the outdoor lifestyle, and snow machining was a huge part of that culture up here. Eagle River was practically built around winter recreation. Half the people I worked with owned snow machines. The idea that an HOA would try to ban them was absurd. I finished my maintenance work and closed the garage door, then headed inside to warm up. My house was a modest 3-bedroom with a view of the Chugach Mountains, and I had fallen in love with it the moment I saw it. The fact that it was in an HOA community had given me pause, but the real estate agent had assured me that the association was reasonable and only concerned with maintaining property values. That evening, I decided to do some research. I pulled out my copy of the HOA bylaws and read through them again, this time with a highlighter and a notepad. After an hour of careful reading, I was certain. There was nothing in the bylaws that prohibited owning or storing a snow machine on my property, as long as it was not visible from the street when I was not actively using it. I also did some research on Alaska property law and HOA authority. What I found was interesting. Alaska had some of the strongest property rights protections in the country, and HOAs had limited authority compared to other states. They could enforce reasonable restrictions that were clearly spelled out in their governing documents, but they could not arbitrarily create new rules or interpret existing rules in ways that were not supported by the actual text. On Sunday morning, I received a certified letter from the Timber Ridge HOA. It was a formal notice of violation, signed by Patricia and 2 other board members. The letter claimed that my snow machine constituted a nuisance vehicle, and that I was required to remove it within 72 hours or face a fine of $500, with additional fines of $100 per day, until the violation was corrected. I read the letter 3 times, my anger building with each pass. This was ridiculous. I had not violated any rules. Patricia was simply making this up as she went along. I decided to attend the next HOA board meeting, which according to the letter was scheduled for Tuesday evening. If Patricia wanted to play hardball, I was ready to push back. Tuesday evening arrived, and I drove to the community center where the HOA meetings were held. It was a small building at the entrance to the neighborhood, with a meeting room that could hold maybe 30 people. When I arrived at 7 o'clock, there were already a dozen residents seated in folding chairs, and Patricia was at the front table with 3 other board members. I took a seat in the back and waited. The meeting started with the usual boring stuff: budget reports, discussion of snow removal contracts, and a debate about whether to plant new trees along the main entrance. Then, about 40 minutes in, Patricia looked down at her agenda and said, "Next item. We have a violation notice that we need to discuss. Yancey Thompson at 847 Spruce Drive has been storing a recreational vehicle in violation of our community standards." I raised my hand. "I would like to address that." Patricia looked annoyed. "There will be a time for community comments at the end of the meeting." "This directly concerns me," I said, standing up. "I think I have a right to respond." One of the other board members, an older man named Gerald, nodded. "Let him speak, Patricia. It is only fair." Patricia pressed her lips into a thin line but gestured for me to come forward. I walked to the front of the room and turned to face the other residents. For those who do not know me, I am Yancey Thompson. I moved to Timber Ridge 6 months ago. Last week, I purchased a snow machine, which I store in my garage. Patricia has claimed this is a violation of HOA rules, but I have read the bylaws thoroughly, and there is no prohibition against owning or storing a snow machine as long as it is not visible from the street. When my garage door is closed, which it is except when I am actively working on the machine or loading it for a trip, the snow machine cannot be seen. I have not violated any rules. There were murmurs from the other residents. I noticed a few people nodding. Patricia stood up. "The board has the authority to interpret the bylaws and to enforce community standards. We have determined that snow machines are not appropriate for this neighborhood." "Based on what?" I asked. "Show me the specific bylaw that gives you that authority." Patricia fumbled with her papers. Section 7, Paragraph 3 prohibits the storage of recreational vehicles in view of the street. And my snow machine is not in view of the street, I said. It is in my garage, with the door closed. But you had the door open on Saturday, Patricia said, because I was working on it. The bylaw does not say I cannot open my garage door. If that were the case, none of us could ever open our garage doors. A woman in the front row laughed at that, and I saw Patricia's face redden. The spirit of the rule is clear, Patricia said. We do not want these types of vehicles in our community. But the rule does not say that, I countered. You cannot enforce the spirit of a rule. You can only enforce what is actually written, and what is written does not prohibit what I am doing. Gerald spoke up again. Yancey has a point, Patricia. I do not see how we can fine him for this. Patricia turned to him, her voice sharp. We have a responsibility to maintain property values. If we allow snow machines, what is next? Add EVs, boats. This neighborhood will start looking like a trailer park. I felt my anger flare. That is insulting. Owning outdoor recreation equipment does not make someone trashy. This is Alaska. Snow machines are a normal part of life here. Another board member, a woman named Deanne, spoke up. I agree with Yancey. My husband and I have been thinking about getting a snow machine ourselves. I do not see the problem as long as they are stored properly. Patricia looked around the table and realized she was losing support. Fine, she said. We will table this discussion and seek legal counsel on the interpretation of the bylaws. You do that, I said. And while you are at it, you might want to ask your lawyer about the limits of HOA authority in Alaska. I think you will find that you have a lot less power than you think you do. I walked back to my seat, my heart pounding. I had never been one for confrontation, but I was not going to let Patricia bully me into giving up something I had every right to own. The meeting wrapped up shortly after that, and as people filed out, several residents came up to me and shook my hand. One man, who introduced himself as Derek, said, "Good for you, standing up to her. Patricia has been on a power trip since she became president. Someone needed to put her in her place." I drove home feeling both vindicated and anxious. I had won this round, but I had a feeling Patricia was not going to let this go. I was right. On Thursday morning, I woke up to find a bright orange sticker on my garage door. It read, "Notice of violation. This property is in breach of HOA regulations. Legal action pending." I stared at the sticker in disbelief. Patricia had put this on my garage in the middle of the night like some kind of vandal. I peeled it off and threw it in the trash, then took a photo of the residue it left behind. If this was going to turn into a legal battle, I wanted documentation. That afternoon, I received a call from a lawyer named Mitchell Graves. He identified himself as the attorney representing the Timber Ridge HOA. "Mr. Thompson, I am calling regarding the violation notice you received. The HOA board has asked me to inform you that they are prepared to move forward with fines and legal action if you do not remove the snow machine from your property." "Did you actually read the bylaws?" I asked. There was a pause. "I have reviewed the relevant sections." "Then you know there is nothing in there that prohibits what I am doing." Another pause. "The board has the authority to interpret the bylaws in a manner that protects the community's interests, not when that interpretation contradicts the plain text of the rules," I said. "Look, I do not want this to turn into a big legal fight, but I am not removing my snow machine. It is stored in my garage out of sight, exactly as the rules require. If the HOA wants to change the rules to prohibit snow machines, they can follow the proper amendment process, which requires a vote of the membership. But they cannot just make up new rules on the fly." "I will convey your position to the board," Mitchell said, his tone frosty. But I should warn you, Mr. Thompson, that fighting the HOA is an expensive proposition. Legal fees add up quickly. So do wrongful fines, I replied, and I will not hesitate to countersue if this continues. I hung up, feeling a knot in my stomach. I had never sued anyone in my life, and the thought of getting dragged into a legal battle was stressful. But I also knew I was right, and I was not going to be pushed around. The following Saturday, I decided to take my snow machine out for the trip I had been planning. I had arranged to meet up with some guys from work at a trailhead about an hour north of Eagle River. We were going to spend the day riding through the backcountry and hopefully see some wildlife. I woke up early, loaded the snow machine onto my trailer, and hitched it to my truck. As I was doing a final check of the tie downs, I heard a car pull up. I turned to see Patricia getting out of her Mercedes SUV, her phone already in her hand. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Going snow machining," I said. "Is that a problem?" "You cannot just ignore the HOA's authority," she said. "This is unacceptable. Patricia, I have been patient with you, but you are starting to harass me. I have not broken any rules. Leave me alone." "I am calling the police," she said, her fingers already tapping at her phone. I laughed. "Go ahead. They are going to tell you the same thing I have been telling you. You have no authority over what I do on my own property." Patricia's face went red, but she put the phone to her ear. I watched as she spoke to whoever was on the other end, gesturing wildly at me and my snow machine. After a few minutes, she hung up and crossed her arms. "They are sending an officer," she said. "We will see what he has to say about this." I shrugged and went back to checking my gear. I was not worried. I had not done anything illegal. About 20 minutes later, a patrol car from the Alaska State Troopers pulled up. A tall officer with a thick mustache got out and walked over. His name tag read Corporal Stevens. "Morning," he said. "I got a call about a dispute." Patricia immediately launched into her complaint. "Officer, this man is violating our homeowners association rules by keeping a snow machine on the property. We have told him repeatedly to remove it, but he refuses to comply. I need you to enforce our community regulations." Corporal Stevens looked at me, then at the snow machine on the trailer, then back at Patricia. "Madam, is the snow machine on his property?" "Yes, and is he breaking any laws?" "He is breaking HOA rules." "Madam, that is a civil matter. The HOA is a private organization. We do not enforce HOA rules. If you have a dispute with a homeowner, you need to resolve it through the civil court system." Patricia's mouth fell open. "But he is in violation." "Of your rules, maybe," Corporal Stevens said, "but not of any laws. Madam, I have to be honest with you. This is Alaska. People own snow machines. It is what we do here. Unless he is riding it recklessly on public roads or causing a public nuisance, there is nothing illegal about owning or storing a snow machine." "But the HOA has authority," Patricia insisted. Corporal Stevens shook his head. "Not over stuff like this. HOAs can have rules about things like fence heights, paint colors, lawn maintenance, that sort of thing. But they do not have authority to ban lawful activities or possessions on private property, especially when there is no clear rule against it. And even if there were, that would be a civil dispute. I cannot arrest someone for violating an HOA rule." I felt a surge of relief and satisfaction. This was exactly what I had been trying to tell Patricia. Patricia turned to me, her face twisted with anger. "This is not over." "Yeah, it is," Corporal Stevens said. "Madam, I need you to stop harassing this man. If you continue to call us out here for non-emergencies like this, you could be charged with misuse of emergency services. Do you understand?" Patricia looked like she had been slapped. She stammered for a moment, then turned and marched back to her car without another word. Corporal Stevens turned to me. "Sorry about that. HOA disputes are the worst. Just keep documentation of everything in case she tries to fine you or take legal action. You might need it. I will. Thank you, officer. He nodded and got back in his patrol car. I watched him drive away, then finished loading my gear and headed out for my trip. The day of riding was fantastic. The weather was perfect, the snow conditions were great, and I finally got to open up my new machine and see what it could do. For a few hours, I forgot all about Patricia and the HOA drama. But when I got home that evening, tired and happy, I found another notice taped to my front door. This one was even more aggressive than the previous ones. It stated that the HOA had voted to impose an immediate fine of $1,000 for willful and repeated violation of community standards, and that if I did not pay within 10 days, they would place a lien on my property. I crumpled up the notice and threw it on my kitchen counter. This was getting ridiculous. I needed to take action. The next morning, I called a real estate attorney named Sarah Reynolds who had been recommended by a friend. I explained the situation, and she agreed to meet with me that afternoon. Sarah's office was in Anchorage, about a 30-minute drive from Eagle River. She was a woman in her late 30s with dark hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. After I laid out the whole story, she leaned back in her chair and nodded. "Okay, this is pretty straightforward," she said. "The HOA is overreaching. Based on what you have told me, they have no grounds to fine you. The bylaws do not prohibit what you are doing, and they have not followed the proper process to amend the bylaws. So, what do?" I asked. "First, you are going to send them a formal letter disputing the fine and demanding that they cease all enforcement actions. I will draft that for you. Second, if they do not back down, we will file a lawsuit for declaratory judgment. We will ask the court to rule that the HOA's interpretation of the bylaws is incorrect and that their fines are invalid. We can also seek damages for harassment and possibly attorney's fees. How much is this going to cost? My retainer is $3,000. If we have to go to court, it could be more, but honestly, I think once they receive a letter from an attorney, they will back off. Most HOA boards do not want to get into expensive legal battles they are going to lose." I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "Let's do it." Sarah drafted the letter that same day and sent it via certified mail to Patricia and the HOA board. In the letter, she laid out all the legal reasons why the HOA's actions were improper and warned that continued harassment could result in a lawsuit. For a few days, things were quiet. I started to hope that maybe Patricia had finally gotten the message. Then, on Thursday night, I got a call from my next-door neighbor, an older man named Tom. "Yancey, you might want to check your garage," he said, his voice worried. I went outside and immediately saw what he meant. Someone had spray painted the words "Remove the sled" across my garage door in large red letters. I stood there staring at it, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. This was vandalism. This was a crime. I called the Alaska State Troopers and reported the incident. A different officer arrived this time, a younger guy named Trooper Mitchell. He took photos of the graffiti and asked if I had any idea who might have done it. "I have been in a dispute with the HOA president," I explained. "Patricia. I do not have proof that she did this, but the timing is suspicious." Trooper Mitchell nodded. "We will look into it. Do you have any security cameras?" "No, but I am going to install some now." After the officer left, I spent the rest of the evening researching security systems and ordered a set of cameras that I could install myself. They arrived 2 days later, and I set them up to cover my driveway, garage, and front door. The graffiti was harder to deal with. I tried several cleaners, but the paint had soaked into the wood of the garage door. Eventually, I had to hire a professional cleaning service, which cost me $400. I added that to the list of damages I was documenting for my potential lawsuit. The following week, Sarah called me with an update. The HOA's attorney responded to our letter. They are backing off on the fine. Really? I felt a wave of relief. Yes, but they are not admitting they were wrong. Their lawyer claims it was a misunderstanding and that they are going to review the bylaws to clarify the rules around recreational vehicles. So I can keep my snow machine. For now, yes. But I would not put it past them to try to amend the bylaws to ban snow machines in the future. If they do, they will need a vote of the full HOA membership, and you should make sure you are present to voice your opposition. I will. Thank you, Sarah. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I received a notice in the mail about a special HOA meeting to vote on amendments to the bylaws. The proposed amendments included a new section that would prohibit the storage of motorized recreational vehicles, including but not limited to snow machines, ATVs, dirt bikes, and personal watercraft, anywhere on the property, including inside garages and sheds. I could not believe it. Patricia was actually trying to ban snow machines entirely. I immediately called Sarah. Can they do this? They can propose it, she said, but it requires a vote of the membership. HOA bylaws usually require either a majority or a 2/3 vote to amend, depending on what the current bylaws say. What does yours say? I pulled out my copy and flipped to the section on amendments. It says amendments require a 2/3 vote of all homeowners. Okay, so Patricia needs to get 67% of the community to agree to this. That is a pretty high bar. What should I do? You need to rally opposition. Talk to your neighbors. Make sure people understand what they are voting on, and show up to the meeting and speak against it. I spent the next week doing exactly that. I went door to door, talking to every neighbor who would listen. I explained that this amendment was not just about snow machines, it was about property rights. If the HOA could ban snow machines today, what would they ban tomorrow? Boats, RVs, work trucks. I found that a lot of people agreed with me. Many of my neighbors owned recreational vehicles themselves, or they had friends and family who did. The more I talked to people, the more I realized that Patricia had overplayed her hand. The night of the special meeting arrived. The community center was packed. Every seat was filled and people were standing along the walls. I saw Patricia at the front table, looking nervous. The meeting was called to order, and Patricia stood up to present the proposed amendment. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "As you know, we have been experiencing issues with the storage of inappropriate vehicles in our community. These vehicles are noisy, unsightly, and they detract from the quality and value of our neighborhood. The proposed amendment will ensure that Timber Ridge remains a place where we can all be proud to live." There were a few murmurs of agreement, but I noticed more people shaking their heads. Patricia continued, "I now open the floor for discussion before we vote." I raised my hand immediately, and Patricia reluctantly called on me. I stood up and addressed the room. "My name is Yancey Thompson, and I am here to speak against this amendment. First, let me be clear. This is not about keeping our neighborhood nice. This is about one person on the HOA board trying to impose her personal preferences on the rest of us. Snow machines are a part of life in Alaska. They are how many of us enjoy the outdoors in winter. They are also expensive investments, and many of us do not have anywhere else to store them. This amendment would force us to either pay for off-site storage, which costs hundreds of dollars per month, or sell our equipment. That is not reasonable." Several people clapped, and I saw Patricia's face tighten. "Second," I continued, "this amendment is overly broad. It does not just ban snow machines. It bans ATVs, which some people use for hunting and accessing remote areas. It bans personal watercraft, which are used in the summer on our lakes and rivers. It even bans dirt bikes. Are we really going to tell families they cannot own a dirt bike? This is government overreach, but from a homeowners association. More applause. I was gaining momentum. Finally, I want to talk about property rights. When we buy a home, we have certain rights that come with that ownership. One of those rights is to use our property for lawful purposes. Owning a snow machine is lawful. Storing it in my garage is lawful. The only reason we are here tonight is because one person on the HOA board does not like snow machines. That is not a good enough reason to strip away our property rights. I sat down to strong applause. Several other people spoke as well, most of them echoing my points. A few spoke in favor of the amendment, but they were clearly in the minority. When the discussion ended, Patricia called for the vote. Ballots were distributed, and we all marked our choices. The counting took about 20 minutes. When Gerald announced the results, I felt a surge of triumph. The vote is 43 in favor, 87 against. The amendment does not pass. The room erupted in applause. Patricia looked devastated. She gathered her papers and left the meeting without saying another word. In the parking lot afterward, dozens of people came up to me and thanked me for taking a stand. Derek, the man who had spoken to me after the first meeting, shook my hand vigorously. "You did it, man. You took on Patricia and won." "We all won," I said. This was about all of us, not just me. Over the following weeks, things settled down. Patricia seemed to retreat from her role, and the HOA board meetings became less contentious. I heard through the grapevine that several homeowners had called for her resignation, but she had refused. Then in early April, something unexpected happened. I was at work when I got a call from Tom, my neighbor. "Yancey, you are not going to believe this. Patricia was just arrested." "What? For what?" "Vandalism. Remember that graffiti on your garage? They finally tracked her down." Apparently, there was security footage from another house that caught her car driving away from your place that night. The state troopers got a warrant and found the spray paint in her garage. It still had paint on the nozzle that matched the stuff on your door. I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. Is she facing charges? Yep, criminal mischief. Could be a misdemeanor or a felony depending on the damage amount. I heard she is also being sued by someone else in the neighborhood for defamation. It is a whole mess. That evening, I looked up the court records online and confirmed what Tom had told me. Patricia had been charged with criminal mischief in the 3rd degree, a Class C felony, because the damage exceeded $500. Her arraignment was scheduled for the following week. I also learned that the someone else Tom had mentioned was Deanne, one of the other board members. Apparently, Patricia had sent an email to several homeowners claiming that Deanne had been embezzling HOA funds, which was completely false. Deanne had filed a defamation lawsuit seeking damages. The more I learned, the more I realized that Patricia's behavior had been escalating for months. The snow machine dispute had just been the most visible part of it. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from Patricia's attorney. It was a settlement offer in the civil case I had been considering filing. Patricia was offering to pay for all damages related to the graffiti, plus an additional $2,000, in exchange for me agreeing not to pursue any further legal action. I called Sarah to discuss it. "I think you should take it," she said. "You are not going to get much more if you sue, and this way you get paid quickly without the hassle of litigation. What about the criminal case? That is between Patricia and the state. Your settlement does not affect that." I thought about it and decided Sarah was right. I accepted the settlement. Patricia's criminal case moved slowly through the court system, as these things do. In July, she eventually pleaded no contest to a reduced charge of misdemeanor criminal mischief and was sentenced to a year of probation, community service, and restitution. By that time, she had also resigned from the HOA board. The new president was a reasonable guy named Martin, who had no interest in policing what people kept in their garages. As for me, I continued to enjoy my snow machine. I took several more trips that winter and the following one, exploring the beautiful backcountry around Eagle River and making friends with other riders. I even started volunteering with a local snow machine club that maintained trails and promoted safe riding practices. The whole experience taught me a lot about standing up for yourself and not backing down when you know you are right. It also taught me that HOAs can be useful for maintaining community standards, but they need checks and balances to prevent individuals from abusing their power. One Saturday morning in October, almost 2 years after the whole drama began, I was in my garage doing maintenance on my snow machine when Derek walked over from across the street. "Getting ready for the season?" he asked. "You know it," I said. "First snow is supposed to hit next week." "Hey, I have been thinking about getting a sled myself. Any recommendations?" I grinned. "Come on in. Let me show you what I have got." We spent the next hour talking about snow machines, and I shared everything I had learned over the past 2 years. By the end of the conversation, Derek was convinced. He bought his own Polaris a few weeks later. That winter, the two of us, along with several other neighbors, formed a regular riding group. Every other weekend, we would load up our sleds and head out to explore a new area. It became one of the highlights of my life in Alaska. The irony was not lost on me. Patricia had tried to ban snow machines from Timber Ridge, but her actions had actually sparked more interest in the sport. Now, instead of one guy with a sled, there were at least a dozen families in the neighborhood who owned them. I never saw Patricia again. I heard she moved out of the neighborhood not long after her legal troubles concluded. I do not know where she went, and honestly, I did not care. I was just glad to be able to enjoy my property and my hobbies without someone constantly looking over my shoulder. One evening in December, after a particularly good day of riding, I was sitting in my living room with a cup of hot chocolate, looking out at the mountains. My snow machine was in the garage, clean and ready for the next adventure. The neighborhood was peaceful, decorated with holiday lights. I thought about how much my life had changed since that first confrontation in my driveway. I had been forced to stand up for myself in a way I never had before, and it had made me stronger and more confident. I had also built real friendships with my neighbors, united by a shared love of the outdoors and a shared frustration with petty authoritarianism. The legal system had worked the way it was supposed to. The police had recognized that Patricia had no authority to enforce her personal preferences, and when she had crossed the line into criminal behavior, she had faced consequences. The civil process had allowed me to defend my rights without resorting to violence or vigilantism. It had not been quick or cheap, but it had been fair. As I sat there, I made a mental note to attend the next HOA board meeting. Not because I was expecting trouble, but because I had learned that democracy, even at the neighborhood level, requires participation. If good people step back and let the petty tyrants run things, bad things happen. But if reasonable people stay engaged and speak up when necessary, communities can thrive. The next morning, I got a call from Tom. "Hey, Yancey, there is an HOA board meeting tonight. They are talking about the snow removal budget. You going?" "Yeah, I will be there," I said. That evening, I drove to the community center. The meeting was sparsely attended, just a dozen or so people. Martin, the new president, ran things efficiently and without drama. The board discussed the budget, approved a new landscaping contract for the spring, and reminded everyone to keep their trash cans out of sight. It was boring, which was exactly how HOA meetings should be. After the meeting, Martin came over to talk to me. "Hey Yancey, I have been meaning to ask you something. We have an opening on the board. Gerald is stepping down for health reasons. Would you be interested in joining?" I was surprised. "Me, I do not know. I have never done anything like that before." "That is okay. We will teach you." "Honestly, we could use someone with your perspective. Someone who understands property rights and is not afraid to push back against overreach." I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. Sure, why not? And that was how I ended up joining the Timber Ridge HOA board. It was not something I had ever planned to do, but life has a funny way of working out. Over the next year, I helped the board update the bylaws to make them clearer and more reasonable. We eliminated several ambiguous provisions that had allowed for the kind of arbitrary enforcement Patricia had engaged in. We also implemented new procedures to ensure that homeowners had a fair process to dispute violations before fines were imposed. The neighborhood became a better place. Property values actually increased, not because we banned snow machines or imposed stricter rules, but because people felt secure in their ownership and proud of their community. I continued to ride my snow machine every winter, and every time I fired it up, I thought about that cold February morning when Patricia had first confronted me. I had come so close to just giving in, to selling the sled and avoiding the confrontation. But I had stood my ground, and everything that followed had been worth it. One Saturday in March, I was loading my sled onto the trailer for another trip when a car I did not recognize pulled into my driveway. A young couple got out and the man approached me. "Excuse me, are you Yancey Thompson?" "That is me. My name is Vincent Taylor. My wife and I just bought a house a few streets over. We heard about what happened with the HOA a couple years ago. I just wanted to say thank you." We were worried about buying in an HOA community, but when we heard how things were resolved here, it made us feel a lot better. His wife, who had walked over to join us, added, "We have an ATV that we use for camping." We were afraid we would have to sell it or store it off-site, but our real estate agent said Timber Ridge is pretty reasonable about that stuff now. "You will be fine," I said. "Just keep it in your garage when you are not using it and nobody will bother you. And if they do, come talk to me." We chatted for a few more minutes, and then they left. As I watched them drive away, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. What had started as a personal fight had turned into something bigger. It had made the whole community better. That afternoon, I met up with my riding group at a trailhead near Eckletna Lake. The weather was perfect, the snow was deep, and we spent hours carving through the powder and enjoying the incredible scenery. At one point, we stopped on a ridge overlooking the lake, and I took a moment to just breathe it all in. This was why I had moved to Alaska. This was why I had fought so hard to keep my snow machine. This freedom, this connection to the land, this sense of adventure. No HOA president or bureaucratic rule was worth giving that up. As we rode back to the trailhead that evening, I thought about all the people who let themselves be pushed around by petty authorities, whether it is an HOA, a middle manager at work, or a government bureaucrat. I had been close to becoming one of those people, but something in me had said no, and that decision had changed my life. When I got home that night, I found an email waiting for me. It was from the Alaska Snow Machine Association, a statewide advocacy group. They had heard about my case and wanted to feature it in their newsletter as an example of how to fight back against overreaching HOAs. I wrote back and agreed. If my story could help even one other person stand up for their rights, it would be worth it. The next morning was Sunday, and I slept in late, tired from the previous day's riding. When I finally got up and made coffee, I stood in my kitchen looking out at my garage. My snow machine was inside, exactly where it belonged. I pulled out my phone and looked at some of the photos from yesterday's ride. There was one of our whole group lined up on the ridge, sleds gleaming in the sun, mountains stretching out behind us. I posted it to social media with the caption, "Living the Alaska Dream." Within an hour, it had dozens of likes and comments. Several people asked about the riding conditions. A couple asked for recommendations on where to buy snow machines. One person, someone I did not know, commented, "I heard you had to fight your HOA to keep your sled. Good for you for standing your ground." I liked the comment and moved on. That afternoon, I drove into Anchorage to run some errands. While I was at the hardware store, a guy in his 50s approached me. "Are you Yancey Thompson?" I was starting to get used to this. "Yes, that is me. I read about your case in the newspaper last year. I am dealing with something similar with my HOA in Eagle River. They are trying to fine me for parking my work truck in my driveway. Can I ask you some questions?" We ended up talking for almost an hour. I gave him Sarah's contact information and explained what I had learned about HOA law in Alaska. By the end of the conversation, he seemed much more confident about fighting back. As I drove home, I realized that what had happened to me had become bigger than just one dispute about a snow machine. It had become a symbol of the larger struggle between individual rights and collective control, between freedom and bureaucracy. That evening, I got a call from Sarah. "Hey, Yancey, I wanted to give you an update. Remember Patricia's defamation case with Deanne?" "Yeah, what happened with that?" "It's settled. Patricia paid Deanne $15,000. Between that, your settlement, the restitution in the criminal case, and her legal fees, I heard she is pretty much broke. I did not feel any satisfaction from that. That is too bad. I mean, she brought it on herself, but still." "The lesson is clear," Sarah said. "When you abuse your authority and harass people, there are consequences." After we hung up, I thought about Patricia. I wondered if she had learned anything from the experience, or if she was just bitter and angry. I hoped it was the former, but I suspected it was the latter. The rest of that winter passed uneventfully. I rode my snow machine every chance I got. I attended HOA board meetings and helped make decisions that affected the community. I went to work, spent time with friends, and enjoyed the incredible beauty of Alaska. In April, as the snow began to melt and the days grew longer, I started planning my summer adventures. I had bought a kayak and was looking forward to exploring some of the rivers and lakes in the area. I wondered if Patricia had ever tried to ban kayaks from Timber Ridge. Probably not, because they fit her idea of what was appropriate. One evening in May, I was in my garage organizing my gear when my phone rang. It was Martin from the HOA board. "Hey, Yancey, just wanted to give you a heads up. We got a letter from an attorney representing a new homeowner. They are threatening to sue because we denied their request to build a fence that exceeds the height limit in the bylaws." I sighed. Here we go again. "Yeah, can you come to an emergency board meeting tomorrow night? We need to figure out how to handle this. I will be there." As I hung up, I realized that the fight never really ends. There will always be someone pushing boundaries, always someone trying to impose their will on others. The key is to have good people in positions of authority who understand the balance between community standards and individual rights. The next night's meeting was tense but productive. The homeowner's attorney laid out their case, arguing that the fence height restriction was arbitrary and unfairly limited their property rights. The board listened carefully, reviewed the bylaws, and ultimately agreed to allow a variance. The fence in question was only 6 inches taller than the limit, and it was positioned in a way that did not affect anyone's view or property value. The attorney seemed surprised that we gave in so easily. I think he had been expecting a fight. After the meeting, I explained to him that we were not Patricia. We were not interested in fighting over minor issues just to assert authority. If something made sense and did not harm the community, we were willing to be flexible. He thanked me and left. As I drove home, I felt good about how things had turned out. This was what an HOA should be. A group of neighbors working together to maintain property values and resolve disputes fairly, not a petty dictatorship. Summer in Alaska is magical, and I made the most of it. I kayaked, hiked, fished, and explored. My snow machine sat in the garage, waiting for winter to return. In August, I got an invitation to speak at a statewide HOA conference in Anchorage. They wanted me to tell my story and talk about property rights and HOA governance. I was nervous about public speaking, but I agreed to do it. The conference was held at a hotel downtown, and there were probably 200 people in the audience when I took the stage. I told the whole story, from that first confrontation with Patricia to the police officer telling her she had no authority to the vandalism, the legal battles, and finally the resolution. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. During the question and answer session, dozens of people raised their hands. Many of them shared similar stories of HOA overreach. A few board members asked for advice on how to avoid becoming the next Patricia. One woman in the front row stood up and said, "Thank you for doing what you did." My HOA tried to fine me for having a flagpole and I gave in and took it down. I wish I had fought back like you did. I felt a pang of sadness for her. "It is not too late," I said. "If you still want that flagpole, put it back up and fight for it. Do not let them bully you." After the conference, several people came up to talk to me personally. I exchanged contact information with a few of them, including a guy named Robert who was dealing with an HOA dispute in Fairbanks. Driving home that evening, I reflected on how far I had come. 2 years ago, I had just been a guy who wanted to own a snow machine. Now I was a spokesperson for property rights and reasonable HOA governance. Life is weird sometimes. As fall arrived and the first snow began to dust the mountains, I felt the familiar excitement building. Another winter was coming, another season of riding. My snow machine was serviced and ready. My gear was organized. I had a whole list of new places I wanted to explore. On the first big snow day in October, I woke up early, loaded my sled, and headed out. The world was white and pristine, untouched powder stretching out in every direction. I rode for hours, just me and the machine and the wilderness. At one point, I stopped on a high ridge and looked back toward Eagle River. I could just barely make out the neighborhood in the distance, a small cluster of houses surrounded by forest and mountains. I thought about Patricia, wherever she was. I thought about all the people who let fear and pettiness control their lives. I thought about how close I had come to giving in to that, but I had not. I had stood my ground, and now I was here, living the life I wanted to live. I fired up the snow machine and pointed it toward the next ridge. There was so much more to explore, so much more to experience. And nobody, no HOA or petty bureaucrat or anyone else, was going to take that away from me. As the sun began to set and I headed back toward the trailhead, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the opportunity to live in this incredible place. Gratitude for the people who had supported me during the fight, and gratitude for the courage to stand up for what was right. When I got home that evening, I pulled my snow machine into the garage and closed the door, as it should be. Out of sight, properly stored exactly according to the rules, but ready to go at a moment's notice. Because this was my property, my equipment, and my freedom, and I had fought too hard to ever take it for granted. The end.